All right, so we're going to get started today. Again, our theme is using TradeLog for 2014 trader tax reporting. My name is Jason Derbyshire, the Education Director here at TradeLog Software. And TradeLog's been producing IRS-ready tax reporting since 1999, so we know a little bit about what we're talking about when it comes to trader tax reporting. As many of you know, in recent years, things have become a lot more complicated for us. So on our website, TradeLogSoftware.com, we've got lots of resources and education on various tax topics related to trading. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't. We'll also be having some updates in the coming weeks to our website to make those resources even more valuable for you. So you'll definitely want to check that out, and I'll show you a little more about that later. Just a reminder that the information we are presenting is for educational and informational purposes only. We are not providing investment, financial, tax, or legal advice. So especially when we talk about tax reporting, some things may vary depending on your situation. So we do encourage you to consult with your tax advisor to discuss specifics about your situation if you do have any questions, because you are ultimately responsible for the decisions that you make. So we just want to remind everyone about that as we get started. So what are we going to talk about today? We talked about using TradeLog for 2014 tax reporting. Well, first we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what's new for 2014 trader tax reporting. We're going to talk about just some of the key things that are significant about the 2014 tax year when it comes to trader tax reporting. That's our focus. I am going to say this because I know some of you have already put some questions in when you register, or some have emailed me some questions. And there's a lot of questions out there about broker reporting with the 1099-B. We'll talk about some of that in general, but we're not going to get into a lot of specifics about what brokers are and are not going to report or how they're going to do it because, well, quite frankly, we don't care too much about what brokers have to report. We're focused on what you as a taxpayer have to report. And there's a lot of questions about what the 1099s are going to look like this year because of some of the changes. So we'll talk a little bit about that so you have a general idea. But some of you that had emailed some specific questions, we may not answer some of those questions during this webinar. We might get opportunities later. If you have a question, you may be able to email us. We might be able to help you out with that. We'll also have some other webinars and blogs as we get into tax season and we get a little bit better feel about what brokers are reporting. But our focus, again, is what you have to report as a taxpayer. And so what we want to spend the most time is talking about how to use TradeLog to create your 2014 tax year reporting. We're going to talk about some of the key steps involved, what you need to be aware of, some of the changes for this year. But we're also going to talk about how to get help if you have questions or problems as we go through the tax year, so that way you can know how to get the best support using TradeLog as well. So let's start by talking a little bit about what's new for 2014 trader taxes. And the biggest thing about the 2014 tax year is for options traders. For the first time ever, brokers are going to be reporting option trades on the 1099-B. Now, some of you may say, oh, well, my 1099 had options before. But keep in mind what you receive from your broker is usually a consolidated statement. They put the 1099 information, but then they put supplemental information. So most brokers were reporting to you details about your options in the supplemental section. This is the first year that brokers are required by the IRS to provide key information to the IRS on options trades. Significantly, they have to report proceeds and sales from any options trades in the 2014 tax year. They also have to report cost basis for most options if they were opened in 2014 going forward. So if you have options that were carried over from 2013 into 2014, if you had open positions, brokers are not required to report the cost basis on that. And so that gets a little bit messy. We'll talk a little more about that later. But this is a big thing, and there are a lot of questions about how this is going to be executed by brokers because this is a new thing. We would hope it would be nice and smooth, but for those of you who were trading back in 2010 and 11 when we first had cost basis reporting changes, especially the 2011 tax year, you'll remember that it was quite challenging. Brokers were all over the place with the 1099. So we're not looking forward to what's in store for 2014. The other thing involved with options is Section 1256 contracts. So some options qualify for treatment as Section 1256 contracts. This includes your broad-based index options. It also includes many ETF options that qualify. So in the past, because brokers didn't report options on the 1099, they really didn't have to get into a lot of detail with that. But starting in 2014, they do have to identify most of these Section 1256 contracts and report those as well. And there's a few little hiccups that we're going to see with that. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but you know, the key is until we start seeing some of the 1099 reports, we really don't know what problems there's going to be. In theory, everything looks great on paper, but already I know some brokers have certain challenges, and we're going to probably run into some challenges when we look at the 1099 reports. The 1099 itself is going to look different. That's something that you're going to notice as a taxpayer. The IRS redesigned some of the required boxes and columns that the brokers have to report on the 1099-B. Unfortunately, it's still a rather useless report for most active traders because the 1099 still isn't going to report unadjusted cost basis or details about wash sales. We're not going to go into that topic, but if you've been with us over the last few years, we've published and talked a lot about some of the challenges with the 1099-B and how it really fails to provide good tax information that is needed, especially for active traders and investments. Also, because of all these changes, we can expect that there's going to be delays and there's probably going to be missing information. I know some brokers have already received extensions on the February 15th deadline, so likely, especially those of you who are heavy options traders, you may not get a 1099 by February 15th, or don't be surprised if you do get one, but then you get revisions, because I'm sure brokers are going to have to be working out some kinks in their systems. Also, there are some exemptions. For example, brokers are generally exempt from reporting options positions that were transferred from one broker to another. So ideally, the IRS would like those brokers to transfer the details about those options, cost basis and such, but there's still some problems and challenges with that, so they were exempted from that from 2014. So don't be surprised if you look at your 1099 and you see that some options may be missing cost basis even though they were opened in 2014, or part of the information may be reported by one broker, part might be for another, or even the same broker if you have multiple accounts if you did have transfers. The other thing is when we talk about Section 1256 contracts, usually Section 1256 contracts are really straightforward on the 1099, and in fact in the past we've even encouraged many taxpayers to not necessarily even use TradeLog, because a lot of times you could use what your broker reported for futures on just off the 1099. But when it comes to some of these options contracts that qualify for 1256 treatment, just a heads up that you might be surprised by some of the results in your 1099-B. I'll give an example. I know of one broker, I'm not going to name them, but based on what they had published a couple of months ago, if you had a contract open in 2013 that carried over to 2014, and it's a 1256 contract, the broker was going to report the sale or the close of that contract in 2014, but they wouldn't report the cost basis of that, or when it comes to 1256 contracts, since those are marked to market, they won't give on the 1099 the fair market value as of January 1st, because it's not considered a covered security by the rules. So it's kind of complicated, and we'll probably be posting something on our blog about this once we start to see if this really is a problem that we see a lot of. But in other words, what might happen is some of these 1256 contracts, the broker may report a lot more gain or loss than you actually had, because there may be some missing information. And it's kind of a little loophole where the brokers could say, well, we don't have to report that because it was opened prior to 2014. It's kind of silly because they should be able to report it, and I think the IRS was expecting that. But again, there's little loopholes. Those are some things that we just really aren't sure of until we start to see the reporting and where the chips really fall with some of the brokers. But I want to give a heads up so that you are aware of those issues, and you can maybe be mindful of that as you start getting your 1099-Bs. From what we understand right now, I don't think I've heard of anyone who's actually received a 1099-B from their broker, but I'm sure if you haven't yet, you'll start to see something on that maybe in the next few days. And once we see those, we may be able to provide some more guidance. But here's a key thing to keep in mind. Well, first I want to mention about Form 8949. Not a lot of changes with the 8949. The actual form itself, the official form, was adjusted a little bit. The IRS put more explanatory text, which in turn reduced the number of lines for trade details. So if you do have a lot of trades, most of us do if we're active traders, that means you're going to have more pages to the 8949 report, thanks to the IRS putting more text on there. But that's really the only change. The actual information that's reported on the 8949 is pretty much the same. And that's because there's really no changes to the tax rules for traders. The law is still the same. For traders and investments. Most importantly, significantly, is the Section 1091 wash sale rules. Those are the same. It still requires taxpayers to account for wash sales that are not reported by the brokers. And that's something that we've talked a lot about in our past webinars, our blog articles, and emails. And hopefully most of you are aware of that when it comes to wash sales, the brokers are exempt from reporting everything on the 1099 that you as a taxpayer are required. And there's no change with that. So I put a slide together here, some important things to remember about wash sales in 2014. So this is something to keep in mind. Even though brokers are now reporting options, they are not required to report all the wash sales that are required, particularly between stocks and options trades. So you may have wash sales that are adjusted between a stock and an option position. Brokers are not required to identify or report those because they only have to do identical QSIPs. You also may have substantially identical option contracts. For example, you may close a long call position at a loss, and then you open another call on the same stock within 30 days, and it may be that should trigger a wash sale. The brokers are going to, in general, treat those as two different securities or different QSIPs, and so they're not going to adjust for those wash sales. So if you are an options trader, it pretty much is going to be useless having the options reporting on the 1099 for you, because the brokers still aren't having to do any additional wash sales between stocks and options or even within different option contracts. Of course, the same also applies if you have multiple accounts. Brokers are not required to adjust wash sales across accounts. And if you have an IRA account that you're trading in as well, if you're trading same securities as you are in your taxable account, well, there are wash sales that apply in that situation as well. And so again, brokers are not required to report those types of things. So that's something to keep in mind. That the wash sale rules pretty much same as we've had the last several years. Brokers are reporting differently than what's required for taxpayers. And so that's why, as I said earlier, when we look at the 1099s, while they do play a part in your tax reporting, particularly in where things are reported on the 8949, as we know, for most active traders and investors, the 1099-B is pretty much useless information. So what we focus on here in TradeLog is just generating the reporting that you need based on rules for taxpayers. Another thing to remember, popular tax software programs are not going to make those additional wash sale adjustments automatically. And this was something, if you followed Teresa Carey's recent article in Barron's, she talked a little bit about the problems. She picked on TurboTax particularly, but it's not just TurboTax. All of the popular made-for-the-masses tax software programs have serious limitations when it comes to wash sale adjustments. And so that's why most of you already use TradeLog in order to make sure and get those wash sale adjustments correct. So those are some of the things that still apply. And that kind of wraps up in general, what's new with trader taxes in 2014. Like I said, we could get into a lot of detail, and we'll probably be publishing some more details about some of these issues. Did want to mention a few of you gave some feedback, and we appreciate that. Some of you said that Fidelity has sent out their 1099s for you, so that's good to hear. So we are starting to see some 1099Bs then, so that's great. So what's new in TradeLog version 14? Well, in case you missed it, we did send out an email earlier today that we have released version 14 of TradeLog. And version 14 has the 2014 tax reporting enabled for Form 8949. And so that version is available. When you run TradeLog, it should automatically prompt you to update to the latest version. Don't worry about keeping an old copy, version 13 or any of that, because basically the software is going to keep you up to date. So if you open your 2013 file, it's still going to look like it did when you open it in version 13. Basically version 14 has accounted for some of the changes for 2014 tax reporting, and it's going to allow you to create final reporting, get rid of that draft watermark. So here's some of the updates in the 2014 tax reporting in TradeLog. Of course, we talk about options trades. So when you run the reconciliation for the 1099B proceeds, TradeLog is going to include options trades in the gross proceeds, whereas in previous years we subtracted that. So that's a big change, and so that's going to help when it comes to verifying trade history. And we'll talk a little more about this later because I'm going to show you some of these key points, but just wanted to kind of run down some of the general. Also, Form 8949, as I mentioned, the layout's been adjusted, so in version 14 of TradeLog, you're also going to see those adjustments to Form 8949 reflected on the reporting. Also, because options trades are now reported on the 1099B, this does change on your 8949 where options get reported. Options now are going to automatically be coded in TradeLog to go on Form 8949, either Part A or D, or Part B and E. So if you remember, there's check boxes. For the short-term 8949 section, you have box A, B, and C. And for long-term, you have D, E, and F. So A and B are boxes that relate to securities that are reported on the 1099. So what TradeLog is going to do now is it's going to look at your option positions. It's going to look at when the position was opened and determine based on that whether it should go on section A and D or section B and E. And I'll show you a little more about that later as well, and how you can override that if necessary. Another thing that we did in version 14 is we did simplify some of the reporting features for the tax reporting just based on the primary features that are used by our clients and by our trader tax experts. And so I'll show you a little bit what I'm talking about with that as we go through the software. Again, since there's no changes to the laws as far as taxpayer requirements, TradeLog still produces your trader tax reporting just like we have in the previous years, based on rules for taxpayers. So there's really no significant changes as far as wash sale adjustments or how TradeLog calculates that. It's all a matter of where we put it on the forms. That's kind of the biggest change we see for 2014. Okay, so let's now talk about how to use TradeLog for 2014. And I want to highlight two very important things to remember to get started. Number one, keep your software up to date. Right now you should be able to update the software if you have an active subscription to version 14. But usually through tax season we have frequent updates. It's not surprising to see one update every week. Just to keep the software up to date. Everyone's using the software, so sometimes maybe we have problems. A broker's changed something on their website, so importing the trade history, we have to update that. Or sometimes too we might find little nuances. For example, we talked about 1099B reporting. As we start to see 1099B reports, we may find that some brokers are doing things a little peculiar, so we may need to add some functionality to help you in reconciling your proceeds with TradeLog. And so any of these updates are going to be included, so that's why we always encourage you to make sure and keep the software up to date. Once in a while we have users who ignore the messages to update their software, and then they end up running into problems, or they don't understand why something's not working. So please keep your software up to date. The second most important thing to remember, and I would probably say this is the most important thing to remember, is to follow the 8 steps in our Getting Started section of the user guide. These steps are essential for success, and everyone's done a lot better with this. Our TradeLog users, many of you are loyal users. You've been with us for many years, and we appreciate that. And we've really been trying to emphasize this in the last several years. Usually, people that have problems using TradeLog, it's because they didn't follow the instructions. And what we find sometimes is ones think, well, those 8 steps, that's just in the quick start guide for new users. But it's really not a new user guide. It's a guide for all users. So what are we talking about when we talk about this guide? Well, let me open up TradeLog here and pull that over. And so when I open up TradeLog software, from the welcome screen here, under user guides, you'll see there is a place you can click on Quick Start Guide, and that's going to go straight to the built-in user guide. And here's the section Getting Started, and we've got 8 steps. Another way you can get to this is through the Help menu. You can click on Getting Started Quickly, and that's going to open up the user guide in the software. If you'd rather look at the user guide online, you can do that also on our website, TradeLogSoftware.com. Under the Support menu, click on Online User Guide, and you will have to click on the Getting Started section, and that's going to take you to those 8 steps. The software sometimes is the best place to check that out because it's right here in the software. So these are the 8 steps. Some of these steps you're able to skip if you use TradeLog in the previous year, but we do encourage you to follow these steps no matter how many years you've been using TradeLog. That way you can make sure that you are successful in using the software each and every tax year. Okay, so let's see. Now what I want to do is actually walk you through these 8 steps, and what we're going to do is talk about using TradeLog. Now I don't have time to explain every single detail in these 8 steps, but what we want to do is go through the 8 steps, and I'm going to highlight some important points that you want to make sure and not miss, not skip. And I'm also going to show you some of the things that are new in 2014, because I know a lot of you have used TradeLog in previous tax years, and again, we thank you for your loyalty. But I want to make sure you understand where things may be a little bit different as you're using version 14 for the 2014 tax year. So let's get into it. I'm going to open up TradeLog again here. And another thing I wanted to point out is there is a quick start panel at the bottom of the screen. Usually this is open by default. You can turn it off in the view menu. You can turn on and off the display quick start panel, and that'll turn that off. But I'm going to kind of leave that on. And we did make some updates to this so that it's up to date with our current instructions. But you'll notice when you open TradeLog, it's at step 1. If I click on the little drop-down box here, you'll see it has all 8 steps. So this panel corresponds with our 8-step guide in our user guide. And what it does is it gives you some of the key instructions right here on the TradeLog screen. So the first step in using TradeLog is, of course, you have to either create a data file or open a new data file. So if you're creating a new file, you can simply from the welcome screen click on Create a New File, or you can go to the File menu and click on New. One thing I want to mention, I'm going to come back and mention this even more later, when it comes to your files, it's important that you name your file accurately. And we have put a little bit of extra code in recently to try to eliminate problems that we see a lot of. You select the tax year for the file. So if you're working on the 2014 tax year, then you want to select 2014. And then you give the file a name. And the best practice is to name your file your taxpayer name. If it's, Jane Doe or John Smith, whatever, this is the name of whoever owns these files, and it's going to be reporting taxes on it. If you're filing for an entity or a corporation, you can put that in the file name. That's best to put. Don't put like your account name or your broker name. We recommend against that because within the TradeLog file, you're going to create all of your brokerage accounts in that one file. So you just need to put in your taxpayer name, and that's usually what's best. What I'm going to do, though, again, since most of you are have used TradeLog in previous years, we want to talk about opening an existing file. If you haven't touched TradeLog since you finished your 2013 taxes, then you especially want to take note of this. When you ended the last tax year, 2013, TradeLog created the next tax year file, so your file for 2014. And so you can find this by clicking on Open Existing File, and it should go to the default location where you have saved your TradeLog files. Now, if you moved some of your TradeLog files, then you may have to do a little searching on your computer to find where did you move those to. Hopefully you didn't delete them, because these files are not stored on our server. They're stored on your computer. So it's important you keep track of your data files. You'll see here, when I click on Open the File, I have a 2014 John demo file. And so this is the file that I'm going to use today. This is for the 2014 tax year. So once I find the file, I can just click on Open, and I open it up. Now you'll also notice I'm going to close the file now and go back to the welcome screen. If you have used TradeLog and you use it once a month or fairly frequently, then usually you can find your files listed under the recently opened files right here on the welcome screen. So if you see your file there, you can just click on it right there, and that's going to open up your file. Now, once we have our file, if we are an existing TradeLog user, so if you use TradeLog for the last tax year, you notice the Quick Start panel is going to skip step 2, which is entering baseline positions, because that step only has to be done the first time you use TradeLog. So what if you are a new user? Well, then you definitely need to follow the instructions for step 2, which is entering baseline positions. And what we're going to do is, in our user guide, we explain how this is done. We have a wizard, the baseline positions wizard, which is going to help you. That's the best way to enter these positions. Basically, what you have to do is give TradeLog a starting point. And you only have to do this the first time you use TradeLog, because in future years, the software is going to keep track of everything that's carried over each subsequent tax year. So if you are a new user, after you create your file, you're going to go to step 2, which is entering baseline positions, and you need to complete that. The other thing I didn't mention about this nice Quick Start panel at the bottom of the window, to view the full instructions in the user guide, you can click on the Help button, and that's going to open up the built-in user guide and go straight to that step that you're working on. So that's another easy way to see the full instructions for the step that you are on. So just simply click on that Help button, and there you go. Also, if you want to view online tutorials for that step, you can click on the Tutorials button, and that's going to take you to our website, and you can see the tutorials and watch videos about how to do that step. So again, most of you used TradeLog last year, so you've opened up your 2014 file. The next step for you is step 3, which is importing trade history. So let's talk a little bit about importing for a minute. Most of you that are with us today are probably filing, you're using cash basis accounting, so you'll be filing Form 8949. So you have to account for wash sales when you're creating your tax reporting. And in order to do wash sales accurately, it's important that we import all the way to the end of 2014, as well as the trades for January 2015, the next tax year. This is because the wash sale rule has to look backwards and forwards within a 30-day window. So any trades at the end of December, there could be a wash sale at the end of January on those trades. And so that's why you import that trade history. And that's what we tell you here in the instructions, that you need to import a full 13 months worth of data. So you'll notice in my file here, I have imported up to January 30th, 2015 in both of my accounts. I have a trading account and an IRA account. So I've imported all of that trade history in there, and that's going to give me what's needed for the 2014 tax year. Now, one of the questions that we often get asked about this as well, what if I'm not ready to end the tax year? I'm not ready to finish, but I want to keep importing. Well, you can do that. TradeLog will allow you to continue importing past January 30th. It will give you a message though to remind you that this is a 2014 file. What's going to happen is when you finish the tax year, any trades in 2015 are going to be rolled over to the next tax year file. So we do encourage you, as soon as you're able to close out the tax year and then use your 2015 file. But if you need to keep importing, you can do that. Now, some of you may have elected Section 475F. You're using mark-to-market accounting. If you are using that accounting method, you only need to import up to the end of 2014, to December 31st. You don't have to import January trades. If you wish, you can continue. Again, if you're not ready to end the tax year and you just want to keep importing, you can do that. But we recommend best practice to stop at December 31st, and then you can actually close out the tax year. You don't have wash sales, so it's not a problem if it's a mark-to-market account. So that's one thing to keep in mind, an important step in step 3. Make sure you import your January trade history if you're filing Form 8949. Also, IRA accounts. If you are keeping track of an IRA account, you also want to import up to January 31st in the IRA account, because some of those January trades could trigger an IRA wash sale. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, so the next thing we do after step 3, I'm going to click on the next button here, and that's going to take us to step 4. And step 4 in our user guide involves verifying your imported data. And one of the ways, the important ways that we do this, well, first of all, you make sure there's no errors. So if you have a big error message popping up, for example, negative share errors is a popular message. If TradeLog has a big message and says negative share errors, these must be fixed, please fix the error. You would be surprised how many times our support department gets contacted by people who are trying to end the tax year, or they're trying to run their tax reporting and they don't understand why there's a problem, but there's a big message in red that keeps popping up saying, you know, warning, error, you need to fix this. So if you see an error message, stop and fix it then and there. Otherwise, you may just compound problems later. And of course, if you need help, you can contact us for support. I'll tell you later how you can do that. So if you don't have any errors, all that looks good, you've imported all of your trade history, well, the next thing to do is to verify your year-end open positions. To do this, you're going to need your December can't even get a word out, your December brokerage statement for the account. Using the December statement, what you're going to do is confirm that TradeLog is showing the same positions open at year-end as your broker is. So what we do, for example, is I'm going to go to my trading account, and I'm going to click on the Open button, and here it's going to show all of the positions that are open as of January 30th, 2015. You see the as of date. Now what I want to do is click on this button that says Year-End Open Positions, and that's going to adjust the list, and you'll see the date. It's now showing me positions that are open as of December 31st. This is the list of positions that I can compare with my broker statement. At the bottom, we give you some instructions, some general instructions how to do this. Of course, you can click on the Help button, and that's going to give you more detailed instructions. One thing to keep in mind when you're looking at your broker statement, you may have some positions that happened in the last few days of the year that are pending settlement. And so your broker may not list them as a holding at the end of the year because it's pending settlement. TradeLog may list that. So if you see a discrepancy, that's one thing to look at. Do you have any positions that are pending settlement? And we explain how to do this step by step here in our user guide. So I encourage you, if you're not familiar with that process, just follow through those steps. Now one of the things, if you can see, and I know it's kind of a small print, but one thing you'll notice is in my list here, because I have options trades, there is an August 14 put that is still showing as open. Obviously that contract should have expired in August. Many brokers don't report the expiration leg of the trade in the trade history. So if you have options positions that are still showing as open past expiration, all you need to do is simply go up here and click on the Expire Options button, and it's going to ask to enter a date to expire them as of, and it's usually going to put the last trade date in the file, and that's what we recommend. So I'll just keep that as it is, click OK. And what it does is it creates the closing leg of that expired position with the price of 0. So you'll see that entered in. That's important. You want to make sure and do that because otherwise you're not going to have accurate taxable reporting if you have those positions still showing as open. So once I do that, now I can go back and you'll see that that position is no longer listed here as an open position. So this gives me a list that I can compare with my broker statement. Now, what do you do if there's a problem? If you see something that is either on your broker statement and not in TradeLog or vice versa, well, that's an indication that there's possibly some trade history that's missing. So maybe you accidentally skipped a date range when you were importing trade history, or your broker for some reason may not have included some trades in the trade history. So that's a red flag. So if you see that things don't match up, then you need to figure out what's wrong. And again, our user guide is going to give you some steps what to do if things don't check out, if they don't match. And of course, if you have problems, then you can contact us and we can try to help you resolve the problems once you provide details. But this is one of those steps you want to make sure and do because it's going to ensure that the trade history is accurate in the software. So you also want to do this for each of your brokerage accounts. So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to go over to my IRA account. Before I look at the open positions, I was going to show you another way that you can expire any options positions that are open is simply to go up to the edit menu and you can edit menu and choose expire options. Okay, and that'll run the same function. So that'll go ahead and expire options. You can do that anytime through the year, but I just wanted to show you that there's two ways to do that. So now in my IRA account, I'll click on the open button, and this is going to show my open positions at year end. And I'll compare this with my broker statement as well to make sure that everything matches up. If there's a discrepancy, I need to address the problem. If everything matches, great, then now I can move on to the next step. So I need to do that in both of my accounts. So if you have multiple accounts, make sure you complete step 4 in both accounts. Once that's completed, you can move on to step 5, which is reconciling 1099 proceeds. But before I do that, I want to mention that there's one other thing if you're an options trader that you want to check for, and that is if there's any exercised option positions, then there may be adjustments that need to be done. And this is something that's not reported in the trade history automatically. But TradeLog has a great function to help you with that. So here's an easy way to do this. If you're in your taxable account, simply go up to the edit menu and choose exercise assign, or you can do Control E on your keyboard. And what this is going to do is TradeLog is going to look through the data and it's going to see if there's any stock positions that correspond to a contract that appear to where the contract may have been exercised. Now again, this is something you do have to do a little bit of work on your own. You have to look at it and confirm, oh yes, that was an exercised option. Here you see I had a contract on Baidu, and I had 300 shares that were acquired on August 4th. The strike or the price of those shares is the same as the strike price, so that's where TradeLog matches it up. So now all I have to do is go down here at the bottom right and click on exercise, and we have more detailed instructions. If you're not familiar with this function, you can check those out. But I'll click on the exercise button, and what TradeLog is going to do, you'll notice up here before I confirm, it's marked the actual contract, those 3 contracts, as exercised. And what it's done is it's adjusted the price of the shares that I received, and it's adjusted that based on the option premium. So now the option generates a net gain or loss of 0. And instead, that $271 option premium has been adjusted to the stock. And that's what's required by the IRS for tax reporting. So TradeLog is going to do this automatically, but you do have to prompt it to check and run this. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes. That'll save my records. And now I can go back to all trades. So if you're an options trader, make sure you do that. You need to expire any options, and you also need to run the exercise assign function. Those are 2 important things to keep in mind. Now, let's talk about step 5, which is reconciling 1099 proceeds. So if you receive a 1099-B, this is an important step you have to complete for your taxable accounts. And the purpose of this reconciliation step is not to use the 1099-B, because TradeLog doesn't use what the broker reports on the 1099-B, because that information usually is useless for taxpayer reporting. What we're doing here is we're reconciling the trade history that is in TradeLog to make sure that it looks like it's all there. And what we can do is we can look at the total proceeds or sales, and usually TradeLog is going to match up with the 1099 on the proceeds. Cost basis, that's a whole nother story, because brokers report adjusted cost basis, so there's really no way to reconcile. That's why we don't use that. So keep that in mind, that the goal here is to make sure that there's nothing missing from TradeLog, that all of our trade history has been accounted for. And when you do these two steps, verifying open positions, which was step 4, and reconciling 1099 proceeds, step 5, that's going to catch 99.999% of the errors that could occur in your trade history. And so this is a proven method in the software. And this year, the reconciling process is a little bit different. So let me show you this. I'm going to go to the Reports menu, and I'm going to click on Reconcile 1099-B Sales Proceeds. When I click on that, there's a couple of options. And if you use TradeLog in the past couple of years, you'll see that this form has a lot less options than it used to. First of all, some of you may have a situation where you don't receive a 1099-B. So if that applies to you and you don't receive a 1099-B for this account, you can just check the box at the top, no 1099-B, and then you can click OK and go on your merry way to the next step. For the rest of us who do receive 1099-B from our taxable accounts, what you need to do is find the gross proceeds from sales, which is located on the 1099-B that your broker provides. Now, every broker is a little bit different. Some of them are wonderful, and they give you a gross proceeds figure. So they give you that figure already added up, and you can just put it right in here. Many of the brokers don't give that grand total, and instead you may have to go through a couple of different sections and add up the proceeds. Keep in mind, you're only finding the proceeds reported to the IRS. Okay? If you need more help with that, click on the button Get More Info, and we explain a little more in detail how what you're looking for. And we also have links to, you got it, our user guide. Step 5 here will take you step by step, and we'll explain a lot more details about what you're entering in this box. So I've gone ahead and entered the gross proceeds for this account, and on the right side here, you'll see it says 1099-B details. Now again, this is where there's a big change, because in past years we had a lot more check boxes because brokers were varying. But we're now 3 years into this new 1099-B cost basis thing. Most of the brokers are reporting the same things on the 1099. This year, options are being reported, so TradeLog's automatically going to assume that. If for some reason your broker isn't reporting options, well, then you're going to have a little more challenge in reconciling your 1099-B, and we're just going to have to help you through that. But here's a significant thing for you options traders. By default, TradeLog is going to assume that your broker has adjusted sales for option premiums. So again, if you had any exercised options, the adjustment of any other sales for those option premiums in the past was something that was optional for brokers. Many of them did adjust for, but not all of them. But starting in 2014 onward, it is required by the IRS that the broker make those adjustments. So that's why by default we've gone ahead and checked that box. Here's where it could get a little hairy. If you have option positions that were opened in 2013 but were exercised in 2014, your broker could choose to not adjust those positions because they were opened in 2013. So you may have some options that are adjusted for, some that aren't. So that's something where if you see you're having a difference on your 1099 reconciliation, that might be the reason why. If you contact our support team, we may be able to help you identify that. So it's really a lot simpler this year as far as what we're entering. We're not entering any cost basis numbers. We're not having to check a lot of different boxes. Enter your gross proceeds. The sales should already be adjusted for option premiums. Now on the bottom right, I can click Run 1099 Reconciliation Report. And what that's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to give me this nice little reconciliation report. And it's going to show the total sales that's going to be reported on 8949. It's going to make any adjustments. In this case, there's nothing that's really being adjusted for. And it's going to give me at the bottom what TradeLog is reporting for sales, what the 1099B is reporting based on what you entered, and the difference. You'll notice here I have a 35-cent negative difference. That is not very significant. That's really good, especially when you're looking at $9.8 million in sales. So that's something to keep in mind, is the difference. Obviously, the closer to zero, the better. A positive difference usually isn't too bad. If you do have a large negative difference, that's a red flag, and that probably means that TradeLog's missing something, or your broker's reporting something that's not in TradeLog, and so that's why you're running this. If you scroll down, we have some notes about this report. We explain a little more about what's being done. And we also talk about what to do if there is a difference, if there especially is a large negative difference. I also want to mention that in our user guide, we also provide more details, and we also give suggestions if you do have a large difference, things to look for that could be the cause of that difference. So check that out before you freak out. A lot of times you can look at that and there may be something very obvious and you say, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So make sure and look over the user guide, and we discuss what to do with that. If everything checks out and you have a minimal difference or maybe no difference, then you've completed your 1099 reconciliation. And what that means is that TradeLog is reporting the same sales, the same amount of sales as your 1099 did. So that means your trade history is pretty accurate. Again, don't be surprised if there's little differences. Sometimes there can even be, $20, $30, $40 worth of difference. It might even be negative. Sometimes you get rounding differences, things like that. You have to determine what's a significant difference based on the total volume. What's your gross sales? Again, when you're dealing with $9.8 million in sales, well, rounding differences can easily account for a couple bucks in difference. Now, if you only had $100 in proceeds and you got a $10 difference, well, something's probably missing or something's wrong. So weigh the information, and again, look at the user guide, and that'll help you along the way. Now, what about if you have an IRA account? Well, you'll notice reconciling the 1099 is not an option because you don't receive a 1099 for the IRA. So all you need to do is verify the year-end open positions, which was step 4, and that's it. Once you've done those two steps, steps 4 and 5, then you're ready to go on to ending the tax year. And that's step 6, process the year end. So everything checks out in your accounts, and what I do encourage people to do too at this point is to go ahead and take a look at your 8949 and see if things look like you would expect them to. Now, you can run the 8949 report from the individual taxable account, but keep in mind wash sales have to be adjusted across accounts. So your big picture reporting, what you're going to report to the IRS, you need to generate that report from the All Accounts tab. And TradeLog is going to warn you about this if you try running the report from an individual account. So what I'm going to do is I clicked on the All Accounts tab. I'm going to go to the Reports menu, and I'm going to choose Form 8949. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back to this later and show you some of the differences with the report. I'm just going to click Run Report right now, and you're going to notice that it's going to generate the report, and there's a big draft watermark in the back of it, and at the top it gives you a note saying that this is in draft mode because you haven't ended the tax year. So this is just a preview, but I do encourage you, before you end the tax year, go ahead and preview your reporting, look at the taxable gains and losses, and make sure everything looks like you would expect. If you see some glaringly huge difference, you go, whoa, that's not right. There's no way I had $41,000 loss. Well, then you may need to contact us and get some help in understanding what's going on in your file. But preview this before you run the end tax year, and that way you can see if there's anything and you're not going to be surprised later. All right, I'm going to come back and explain 1256 contracts a little bit later to you as well. What I want to focus on right now, we're on step 6, which is process year end, or ending the tax year. One of the things that you have to do before you end the tax year is select each account, and you need to complete the year-end checklist. And you can either do this by right-clicking on the account tab, or you can go up under the account menu and choose year-end checklist. And what this checklist does is it just makes sure that you've completed some of the important things we just discussed. If you had options trades, that they're expired, that you exercised any options that need to be exercised, you verified your year-end open positions, and you reconciled the 1099. You'll notice there's a button, so you can click on these buttons if you need more instructions or if you want to go and complete that step. So if you see something and go, oh, you know, I didn't check and see if I had any exercised options, well, you can click that button and TradeLog will check for you. This is just a way of us kind of making sure that our users are completing these steps. Some people say, well, why do I need to fill out this checklist? I know what I'm doing. Well, because 90% of people maybe forget a step. And so this way we make sure that everyone completes those steps. Do it for each account. I'm going to go to my IRA account, do year-end checklist, and here I only have to check off expired, exercised, and verified because I don't get a 1099 on the IRA. Once you've done that, once you've completed those checklists, then you can go to the File menu and you can run the end tax year process. And when you do, it's going to pop up a message warning you that this should only be done to end the tax year, and it's going to give you some reminders. So again, this is something you only do when you've verified everything and you're done for the tax year. What it's going to do is it's going to close the books on that tax year, and it's going to create the next tax year file as well as any rollover positions. And so you want to make sure you've got everything done before you do this. I'm going to click yes to continue. It'll only take a few seconds. TradeLog is going to make the adjustments, and it's going to pop up a message saying year-end processing is complete. Once you've completed the year-end processing, you'll notice the account, the edit, and the add menus are grayed out. You can no longer edit trades in this file because you've said you were done, so we close the books on the file. But you'll also notice if you go to the File menu, there should be a 2015 file that's been created, or you can go to File Open if you can't find it under the File menu. And that file is going to have, I'll just go ahead and open it up, it's going to have all of the 2015 trades as well as any positions that were carried over to 2015. All that's going to be put in your 2015 file ready for your use next year. Let's go back to the 2014 file, though, because I want to talk next about Step 7, which is running your tax reporting, your gain and loss reporting. So to run your tax reporting, again, you want to do this from the Reports menu. And the options that are available are going to depend on your settings. If you have accounts where you elected MTM, then you're going to have MTM reporting available. Of course, you also have to have an MTM version of the software. For most of you, again, I want to talk about Form 8949. Okay, Form 8949, I click on this, and it opens up a menu at the top. If you use TradeLog in the past years, you may notice something a little bit different. There's used to be another option up here, but we've deprecated or removed this option for the 2014 tax year. That was an old option where we allowed you to create an adjustment line on the 8949 for cost basis. In general, we're discouraging use of that now because it didn't really make a difference as far as the IRS is concerned. And most of our trader tax CPAs that we partner with have agreed that it's really not necessary. And so what we do is we create an 8949, but we do have a statement explaining differences and adjustments. This was something we added last year, and we still have this available for this tax year. So this is going to be included. So you can also choose to include your Social Security number on your report or your EIN number. If you check that box, it's going to open the report setup, and you'll need to put in your Social Security number or your EIN number in order to include that. Also, there's an option to create the Form 8949 PDF. This is used for e-filing, so I'll talk about this in a moment. but there's a checkbox here that allows you to do that as well. If you're not familiar with the statement of differences, I encourage you to check out, click on the What's This button, and in our user guide we explain the statement explaining differences and how this is used. This is a form that TradeLog generates based on your file, and you can actually use this, you can send it to the IRS as an attachment, and we encourage taxpayers to use this because it explains to the IRS why there may be differences between how you report your 8949 and how your broker reports the 1099-B. And as we said, there's major differences that affect most active traders and investors. And so this is going to explain that. So that way if the IRS does say, well, wait a minute, we see a difference, and they're looking through your tax return, they can see this statement and say, oh, okay, now we understand. And it really shows that you as a taxpayer, you've done your homework. You're making sure that you're filing based on the law, based on all the wash sale rules. And so we explain that on there. Now there is a checkbox here which is optional. Only use this if you have other errors on your 1099-B that we don't explain in this statement. Again, click on What's This and we'll take you to the user guide and we'll talk about this checkbox. If there are other errors, you can check that box and we're going to include something on that statement for that purpose. So what I'm going to do is run my 8949 report now. And one of the things that you're going to notice in the 8949, just as in previous years, we're going to go ahead and assign everything to the proper section of the 8949 box A, B, and C. And at the end of the report, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. The second to the last page, we give you a summary page. Let me zoom out here. Here we go. And you can use this page. Don't attach it to your tax return, but this is just used to give you the totals that you're going to put on Schedule D, okay, based on your 8949. And then the last page is the statement explaining Form 8949 differences and adjustments. So that's that statement which you can include with your tax return if you wish. So all of that's going to be put there. Now one thing you're going to notice, if you have options trades, TradeLog is going to automatically determine whether it should be reported in Box A, Box B, Box D, or Box E. You probably won't have anything reported in Box C. Most of you won't have anything reported in Box C starting in 2014 unless you have some special situation. Same with Box F. Those are the same category. Most everything should be in Box A or B, and TradeLog is going to use general rules to determine what's reported in that. But sometimes there may be a situation where you need to override those rules, and there is a function in TradeLog that allows you to do that. And it's the function for the code, the 8949. Let's see. In order to show this, I can't show you the full function right now because this file's locked. But when you right-click on a trade, it's the Change 8949 code. So there is the ability, if your broker reported something differently than the general rules apply, we can change that. And if you're not sure how to do that, contact us and we'll point you to the instructions, or you can search in the user guide. I can pull that up right now. Just go to search and put Change 8949 code, and that's going to pull up this particular function for adjusting Form 8949 code, and we're going to explain how to use that. So that is available if you need to override that. Now the other thing I wanted to mention, if you have Section 1256 contracts, those broad-based index options, things like that, you'll notice when I ran my 8949, when I was finished running that report, I got to run it and close out now, it popped up a message that says your data file includes Section 1256 contracts. And so that is reported differently. That's put on a separate form. And so if you have this pop-up message, then you want to make sure that you go to the Reports menu and run the Section 1256 reporting. And I don't have a whole lot in this file, but I do have a few, $3,600 in losses. So you'll need to use this, and these totals get entered on Form 6781. So I wanted to make sure and point that out as well. So that kind of gives you a general rundown. Now step 8 is filing your taxes. And really there's a lot of options, and we're running out of time because like I told you, I was going to have a lot to cover. But under filing taxes, what I encourage you to do is click on Help, go to our user guide, and we talk about different methods of filing. If you want to e-file your taxes, click on electronic filing or e-filing. Or you can use other methods, like if you're going to use a CPA, if you're doing your own taxes. But under electronic filing, we strongly recommend using the Form 8453 method unless your tax software allows you to attach a PDF. But make sure and look through these options carefully. And we'll be giving more information in the coming weeks talking about some of these different options in our email newsletters as well. We'll explain some of the best ways to use e-filing as you start getting ready to actually file your taxes. But in our user guide, we explain a lot of these different options and then what you can do in TradeLog to take advantage of these options. Okay, so I want to go back over to our presentation for a moment because I want to talk about what to do if you need help. We've added a fantastic little function in TradeLog to help you get the best support quickly. On the top right corner of the screen, you probably noticed a button, and I put a little screenshot here of it so it's easy for you to see, that says Get Support. So if you need support, you need help, you're using TradeLog, open the file in the software, go to the top right corner and click Get Support. What this is going to do, it's going to pop up a box then. I'll actually show you right now. So I'm going to click Get Support. It's going to pop up a box. I put in my name and my email address, and I put in a detailed description about why what I need help with. And then I click Send. And what it's going to do is it's going to send not only your support request, but it's also going to include your TradeLog data file, and it's going to include some of the internal logs that help our support staff to understand the problem that you're having and how to resolve it. And this is the best way to get support because we don't know what's in your data file unless you send it to us. So sometimes people send in a support request and they say, I need help with this, and we end up going back and forth getting more information or asking for your file. If you do it this way, it's going to go directly from the software. It's going to send everything we need, and we can see the problem. And usually our first reply is going to have instructions that you need instead of questions asking for more information. Sometimes people ask, well, is it safe? Yes, your file is transferred via secure server. It can only be accessed by authorized TradeLog staff. It's password protected, the server, it's encrypted. Your social security number is not included in the file. So if you put your social security number for your reporting, that's not stored in your data file. That's encrypted and stored elsewhere on your computer's registry. Any account credentials, like your password or something for your account, those are all encrypted. So even if someone was to open your file, they wouldn't be able to read what those credentials are. So it's very safe, very secure. We've been using this method for many, many years. But we just added this button to make it even easier for you to get support. So we really encourage you, if you can open your file and you need support, please click the Get Support button and submit your request that way. That way we can give you the best support in the quickest amount of time. Now, if you can't open TradeLog and you're having problems, of course, then you're going to need to contact us another way. And then the best way is to simply go to our website. If I can find what I did with our website, 1 second here. So you go to our website at tradelogsoftware.com, and under support you have the online support request. So if you can't open the software, you can't open your file, you can submit your support request this way. You can also attach files, so you can attach your file here, but it's easier to send the file from the software. But contact us if you do need support, and we are here to try to help you. We're going to give you the instructions you need to get back on track and get going. Do you need professional help? We do have professional partners who can do all or part of your trader tax reporting. So oftentimes I ask people, how much is your time worth? Many active traders that use TradeLog save hours of time and get the best results by using one of our approved service providers, especially if you're not real adept maybe at computers or TradeLog is just too complicated for you to use. We encourage you to check out our service providers because they may be able to save you time and money even on your taxes by making sure and do your reporting accurately and quickly. And again, on our website, if you go to the support menu, there's accounting service providers, and here's where we tell you about the approved service providers that can use TradeLog for you and some of the services that they offer. So I encourage you to check that out. All right, so that pretty much brings us to the end of our presentation. Just a few things to remember. 1099-B is going to have big changes for options traders this year, but the rules for taxpayer reporting really stay the same. So make sure you keep your software up to date, follow the 8 steps of our Getting Started guide, and use the Get Support button if you need help. That's going to help you to be successful using TradeLog this year. And of course, again, this has been an hour and 10 minutes. We've covered a lot of information. We're going to have more webinars and more information, especially as we start to see more 1099s and see some of the issues that may affect active traders. So stay tuned, especially in your email box. We'll send out newsletters and let you know about the events that are going on. And you can join us for those events. And you can always watch this webinar as well as our other webinars. Go to our website at TradeLogSoftware.com. Under the Support tab, you can click on Webinars, and you can find our archived webinars. And as I mentioned, we will email a link to this webinar to all of you as soon as the recording is available. So thank you all very much again for joining us. I think my assistants answered some of the questions that you had. If you do have other questions, you can contact us, submit a support request, or email us at support@TradeLogSoftware.com and let us know if there's a particular question or problem that you're having. We'll be here through tax season to help you out, and we hope that it'll be fairly easy, but that you'll be able to generate accurate trader tax reporting using TradeLog. All right, so thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and hope you have a great night.